Good evening, everybody. I want to start off with a little preface. I'm feeling a little under the weather, and I worked 9 hours today, and the rain didn't help. So, bear with me. I may not be all there. I will do my best. So, today we're going to do something a little bit different than what we've done. If you've noticed on your handouts, actually, they're a little smaller. There's a little less stuff to read. There's actually spaces where you get to write. This is going to be more of a classwork lesson, because I was trying to think about how we're going to go about this lesson, and the subject matter and our goal for the class lends much better to actually sitting down and just working through it together. So it's going to be a really quick introduction. Hopefully it'll lay a little bit of context and maybe help you think about what we're going to do. And then we're just going to get right into the dirty work. So, as far as introduction goes, who is the word we're going to focus on today, and the question connected to it is, who are the types of people that the original text was written to? So if you remember, we're using these who, what, where, when, why, and how phrases to kind of guide our way through as an introduction. And who is the word today? So what I want to do is I want to list some similarities and differences that we can see in the first century audience that the scriptures are written to. They're written to a first century audience, and with how they compare and contrast to our day and age. If you look at your handout there under the introduction, I've got a little job for you to do. I want you to list some things that you think you do in your life that transcend time and culture. In other words, something that would make sense even in first century Rome. So go ahead and think about that while I give you this wonderful list that I thought of with a few different books. So, how different do you think the first century audience was to us, if at all? Think in your head. Do you think they were smarter? Do you think they were less intelligent? I can assure you that they were actually closer to how our modern world thinks, how our modern world acts, and how our modern world goes about their daily lives than at just a first glance. So the first century person living in the Roman Empire wanted a lot of different things in their life. And there's quite a few that I came across in thinking about this. So I'm actually going to read them off. So they wanted to bring forth children to ensure legacy. They delighted in citizenship to improve their advantage among their constituents. They usually lived some distance from a main hub of commerce that they had to travel to in order to get specialty items. Moving to a main hub of commerce was seen as an improvement in quality of life. But still near their homes, all of the quote-unquote essential amenities existed for their daily consumption. Families lived in the same home till their children married and then moved into their own home, generally still nearby. The religious practices and beliefs of those near them varied greatly. They weren't just a monolithic singular, they were very different. Where am I at here? And they also borrowed from one another. I forgot about that part. Yeah, they borrowed from one another and grabbed their own. Think, if you will, in our own context, think of the normal person walking around Portland. Probably thinks a lot of Buddhist thoughts, a lot of Taoism, and then a lot of Shintoism, this Japanese religious practice, and they also probably have a very vague Christianized religious ethic as well. They're just borrowing from every different worldview. Most ethnic groups gathered together, lived together, or identified with one another. Personal hygiene was important. Furthering the cause of the collected whole was seen as good ethics. The meaning and purpose of marriage was a hotly contested debate. Wealth and education was seen as success, or you were successful if you had these things. And it was a multilingual society, yet one language was largely primary. These are just a few similarities that I want to emphasize in understanding our commonalities with the original audience of the New Testament. Just some, just a few. There were, however, many cultural differences. These differences changed in large measure because of the influence and the effect of the gospel, and those, in large measure, believing and living out the gospel on their culture and society. Some of the large-scale differences were primarily an agrarian society. Most people did not live in commercial centers, or large commercial centers, rather. To many, marriage was seen as a burden and only to produce offspring. Just let this sink in. To many, a wife was just someone who managed your household affairs and bear you children, and they bore children to you. Prostitutes and slaves were for pleasure. Literacy and education was not seen as necessary for the lower classes, quote-unquote lower classes. There was only 2 classes. Religion was seen as important. In fact, it was a necessity to show your loyalty to the empire. Information moved much slower. I'm sure we all know that pretty well. To have something inscribed, whether in paper or on stone, was seen as permanent, not temporary. One's vocation was normally chosen based on your heritage, and you went into this vocation before you reached adulthood. Marriage was something that happened for monetary gain for the wealthy and for physical well-being for the poor. Hygiene was done publicly and communally. Side note, only the wealthy or educated had privilege and status. The poorer classes lived in 1 or 2 room homes, and their animals lived in it with them. Read here, not just dog and cat. Read chicken, donkey, you name it. Only the wealthy had anything commensurate to our lavish 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square foot mansions. And there was no middle class. It's 2 classes, poor and rich. Rich, poor. There. So there are many more dissimilarities and commonalities between the original audience of the New Testament and us. But what I want you to realize is that the same message that is preached and written to them is for us as well as them. So again, I'm sure most of us have heard that the gospel and the message of Scripture transcends culture. Where was that? So I want you to mark that sentence. It is written to them, yet for them and for us. I want to keep that in your mind. I want you to keep that in mind as we delve into this 4th lesson of this introduction to Greek. We're going to look at 2 parts of speech tonight that are in most every sentence that we're going to cover, or that is in Bible or anything, and they're very important parts of speech. As you can probably see them on the board. I've already wrote them out. So what was that sentence that I said I wanted you to mark again? I think I might have written it on your handout. Did I do that? Sort of. It is, the New Testament is written to them, yet for them and for us. So there's actually prepositions and conjunctions in that statement, and they tell you how it's functioning. Remember that the Bible is written to a particular audience. Even the Old Testament is written to a particular audience. The Old Testament's not written to the New Testament audience. It's written to an old one, but it's still written for them and for the New Testament audience. The same way the New Testament audience. The New Testament's written for them and for us. For, the word for, F-O-R, is a preposition. It shows the relationship between what is written, the subject and the object in various parts of the sentence. And the word and is a conjunction. It's connecting all these things. So we're looking at conjunctions and prepositions. Big surprise. 2 parts of speech that without them, little we say or read would make much sense at all. And we're going to do this primarily looking at the conjunctions and prepositions in John 1:1 through 5. That was a lot of fun writing that up there, I must say. We're going to work through it very slowly. And we're going to see how they function in the clauses, phrases, and sentences within our chosen verses. So before we delve in, I'm sure I promise this will make more sense as we go through. Are there any questions before we get going? Any questions at all? Any questions? All right, captivated audience. I hope my introductions are riveting you every week. So, lesson 4, sitting in shallow water. So, another thing that we've been doing is we've been using this metaphor of slowly getting deeper in this pool that starts off with a really, really shallow, put your toe in, get the ankle in. Last week was kicking around in tide pools or walking in tide pools. Today we're going to sit down in 2-inch water. Not even a difficulty. It's going to be a little cold though. So, I want to remind ourselves of our 6-week goal, and it's to understand most of the following verse without the aid of an English text. And it is John 1, 1 through 5. So you have it on the board there. So real quick, before we get any deeper, you should actually be able to, at this time, with the material that we've had and the discussions that we've had, recognize certain words because they've been vocabulary words, and also recognize the endings of various words that are not underlined in red. So the underlined or blue. Red and blue, disregard those words for now. You should be able to recognize the various words and broadly be able to understand that one's being used as a subject, one is a direct object, and dative, and so forth. And that's about as far as I'd expect you to be, unless you really decided to just go all the way, which is fine with me. So, we've covered the article, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and pronouns. And with what we've learned, there are only 3 things left to be able to understand our verse. It's technically 4, but disregard one thing that I totally didn't show anybody. So, the very first word in John is actually a preposition. It's N. So on your handout there, the first thing there says to write N, and then a little question. What does it mean? So feel free to participate in writing them out. It'll help you remember them, especially with this kind of a topic that's a little more difficult to get in people's heads. And there's a big reason why. Because N commonly means in or in the realm of. As David Mathewson says in his intermediate Greek grammar, quote, "It is the most frequent and versatile preposition in the New Testament," end quote. This word can be and is translated into English many ways, and here are just a few. Brace yourselves. In, on, at, near, to, by, before, among, with, within, and when. Yes.
Cool.
I know what you're thinking, though. I know what you're thinking. How do I know which one that I'm supposed to translate it in?
Context.
Yeah. Context. Big word. So here's a good example from Rodney Decker's Beginning Grammar. If you look at page 5, the last page in your sheet, the last 2 pages are reference material. So don't worry about them too much. So this is a really good little... That's 2 pages, and I can't seem to... There we go. So it's a really good reference to figure out what exactly I mean by context. So read along with me, and I'm just going to read through it. So you have noticed by now that the word context shows up quite frequently in this textbook. It does, by the way. Over 200 times. Perhaps you've begun to think that Greek is unique in this regard, that it is the only language that requires so much attention to context to decide what something means. Greek is actually quite normal in this regard. We do not notice it in our own language because we do it intuitively, a word I brought up last week, without even realizing that we are making such decisions. Here are a few examples to help you understand how important such contextual decisions are in English. I think you'll be able to read those. Go ahead and if you guys don't mind, if I point to you, if you could read each one. So Jody, could you read the first one in that list?
The bandage was wound around the wound.
Wow. Megan, could you read the next one?
The dump was so full that it had to refuse more refuse. I don't know. I don't use that word for anything else besides refuse. So refuse.
Yeah. Perfect. Karen, could you read the third one?
Since there is no time like the present, he thought it was time to present the present.
Ah, good one.
Ron, could you read the fourth one?
After a number of Novocaine injections, my jaw got number.
Oh.
That one trips me out every time.
I almost drooled on that one.
And my apologies, I don't know your name.
Marianne. That's okay. Marianne.
Marianne, could you read the last one in that list?
How can I intimate this to my most intimate friend?
Oh, man, they're so good. So, yes, these are all homonyms. They're not prepositions or conjunctions. They're homonyms. But how does an English speaker disambiguate forms with different meanings, especially when many of them involve different parts of speech? How do we know that a given word is a noun rather than a verb, or which meaning of a noun is intended? Context. So, before we go any deeper into more prepositions or anything, I just want to sit on N for a minute, this little one. So, much of how even we use our own language is intuitive. So if you remember the example I gave last week, an English sentence, I don't have anything juice this week, so I'll use coffee. I drink the glass of cup. I drink the cup of coffee in my hand. So in is a preposition. It means the same as this, but how am I using that preposition? One could translate it or interpret it to mean that the cup of coffee is inside of my hand. It's in it, which would be incorrect because it's not. It's in. I am utilizing my hand to drink the coffee. We already know this. You know the coffee is not inside my hand. The cup is not. So we already know it. It's because of the words around it, the context in which I'm talking about. So there's more than just saying, this word means blank. Run with it. You have to know a little bit more about language. And that's what we've done with a few different words, knowing nouns, knowing verbs, subjects, object. No verbs yet. Subjects and objects. That's what's going to help us understand this particular word because it has many different ways of translating it, but it's going to be context. How is the author using the word in? Is he using it in a locative sense where this logos, which is the subject, is, don't worry about that right now, is inside of whatever the arche is? Arche? Is he inside of it? Or is it more of a temporal reference? I can't think of a good temporal way to use the word in.
In the moment.
Yeah. I am in the moment. That's actually a really good one.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. So there's also a spatial way of saying it. I'm in the car. I'm not inside the engine block or anything, but I'm inside the car. So another one that I want to cover on is this idea that what prepositions do. So does anyone remember that word that we used to remember the dative case? The dative case. What was the word to help us categorize what the dative case does?
Relationship.
Gold star. So, relationship. The dative case, which will always end with an iota, so this letter right here, the iota, either subscripted, like this one, or I don't think we have a plural down here. No, we don't. We don't have a plural dative. Or in the plural, it'll be on the line. And so what the dative does is it shows various relationships. What prepositions will do is they'll bring out those different relationships depending on the preposition used. So you don't need N to know that this logos has a relationship with this word because it is in the dative. What this N is doing and what prepositions will do is they'll bring out a particular meaning of the dative instead of just this broad scoping thing. And it's because it's an inflected language. It's the difference between English and other languages of that sort. So, yeah. So we'll move on to our next word, our next preposition. Any questions on N before we move on? Any questions? Okay, that's a simple one. So, N is used with the dative case. It's always used with the dative case. Always. However, the next preposition we have shows up in all three oblique cases. An oblique case is everything that's not nominative. So that's genitive, dative, and accusative. So those other three cases. And the next one is pros. So it's the next one in our list. The next red one up here on the board. Pros. Pi, rho, omicron, sigma. Pros. And so, again, it's used in all three different ones. And its basic meaning, standard basic meaning, is akin to facing toward something, or more explanatory, face to face. And it can be translated with, the words to translate it may be with, to, or at. With, to, or at. Think this face to face. If Kofi and I are standing face to face, I am with Kofi. I'm talking to Kofi. Kofi and I are pros location. We're at a location. So forth and so on. That kind of idea. Pardon. So, the next preposition, that one's actually a really easy one. There's only, and as a small side note, it's actually used in the genitive only once in the entire New Testament. But yeah, that's irrelevant, I would say, for our purposes. So the next preposition in John 1 only uses two of those cases, the genitive and the accusative. Yeah. And that is thea. So it's the next one down the list. So N, pros, N, pros. So this one, thea. So if you've noticed on the board, can anyone read that? Is that too far away for anybody? No? Awesome. Cool. So if you notice, I'm going to grab my black one. It doesn't work very well. This thea doesn't have an alpha at the end of it, like in your handout. It actually has an alpha. What this is, I do have to explain it, because if you ever read a Greek text, you may find this. A lot of times, prepositions that end in vowels, when they come before a vowel, before a word that starts with a vowel, they drop their vowel, and then you get this smooth breathing mark, and you do actually end up pronouncing them together. So this would be theautu, theautu, theautu. But this is still dia. It means nothing different. It means the exact same thing.
Is there a technical name for when that happens?
I can't remember what the name for it dropping its vowel. I do know what it means when they are pronounced together or share the same accent marks. It would be enclitic or proclitic. So it basically, that's what it does. It becomes almost a contraction, at least in saying the word. But
So you don't have to say dia and then again. So
no, you just say diautu.
Okay.
Diautu. So, but I just had to explain that just because this doesn't look like dia. But it is. So, dia, its standard meaning is something about like between, through, or because of. Between, through, or because of. A lot of times with prepositions, they have this standard definition, which is more often than not what it means. And a good rule of thumb when you come across them in a text is, say you have a Greek dictionary or Strong's Concordance or anything with you, and you're working through this text. You got your English Bible and you got a Greek Bible sitting there. You're working through it and you come across the word. You start with its standard meaning and read through and ask a question. Ask the question, did that make sense? If it didn't, usually in your Greek dictionary, there's going to be a whole bunch of different definitions. For example, if you were to look up the definition for, where is it? I think if you looked up the definition for the word, I can't think of where it is. Probably this one. If you looked up this definition or even this one, they'd be like 2.5 pages long. But at the end of the day, they almost mean the same thing in each different section. It's just each section just gives you a little bit of small nuance. But that's neither here nor there at this moment. So let's see. Right en, what does it mean? Right pros, what does it mean? Right dia, what does it mean? So before we get to our last preposition that we're going to cover, I want to ask questions. So, is Marianne?
Yes.
Marianne, I hope you're following us along. I haven't been in any of the classes yet, but nonetheless, what does pros mean, or pros?
With.
With? Yeah. Very good. Megan, what does dia mean?
Between, through, or because of.
Oh, fantastic. And Kofi, what's en mean?
Or in the realm of.
In the row? Yeah, perfect. Good. Awesome. So we're all following along. So, the last one in our verse, the last preposition, is what we call an improper preposition. And no, that does not mean it has bad manners. What it means is a proper preposition is one of those prepositions that actually can be prefixed to a word. So they become, what was that word used again? I totally forgot. When you put two words together?
Contraction?
Yeah, they actually contract. You can actually put words together. This is actually a good one. It can get prefixed to a verb. This is actually a contraction. This is the verb for receive, and this is a verb for against, something along those lines. So you're contracting these two together, and you're creating a different word that means something not against and not receive, or it could mean against receive. Contractions are odd.
Almost like a compound word?
It's a compound word. It is.
Is it a combo? Is it like literally like in a meaning? Is it a combo of the word to receive into?
Sometimes. I will cover this next week when we do verbs. I'm not doing verbs. I'm not doing verbs today.
Cool.
They're entirely another animal
Not
in
talking
Greek.
about it.
And this is a great verse to look at because we have very few verbs, lots of nouns, and a few prepositions. So there is a method to my madness. So the last one we have on your handout there, the last page of page 1, right? Or page 2? Page 2. Page 2 is choris. It's one of those improper prepositions, and it commonly means without or apart from. If I remember correctly, it doesn't have any more meanings. That's its basic meaning. Without or apart from. So think opposite of pros almost. Not exactly, but think somewhat of the opposite. So if pros means with most often, a lot of times, choris would be not with. So those are our prepositions, all of the prepositions in John 1 through 5. So before we move on to our next part of speech, I want to look at where we're at in John now. So if we look at it, we have ho, logos. This is a verb, don't worry about it. Ho, logos has a relationship to archi, meaning in. So we all know the verse in English, the first verse of John 1:1. It says, in the beginning was the Word. Even without that, you can understand it. With Greek, you'd look at it and you'd ask, enarchi. So what, who or what or how is enarchi working? You take this away. So this is the subject. So the logos is in the beginning, and we're not quite sure how that's working necessarily. But you'd understand that. He's related to the beginning. Whatever this beginning is, he's related to it. Then you move on. You go to the next one. We don't know this word yet, so we go to the next one. You go logos. So here's this same logos again, I imagine. Verb, we don't worry about that. Pros. So logos. So this logos is with ton theon. So because of the ending of the article matches up with this noun, this tells us is the object, the direct object. So this logos is with, and we know this word means God. So the logos is with God. So this logos, in the beginning, logos with God. Okay. So we move on to the next one. So now we have this odd way of putting things because this is the ending that tells us it's a subject. This article tells us it's a subject, and it's modifying this because it's after it. And this ending says it's a subject. So this is one of those that we haven't quite covered too much yet. Think it's being used in this adverbial way, if you remember our discussion about adverbs. And then if you see an article in front of a word and another word with it is not an article, then it would give this meaning of the blank is blank. So the word is God. So without knowing verbs, without knowing conjunctions, you should be able to look at the verse so far, this whole first verse, and say, in the beginning, so the word is in the beginning, the word is with God, the word is God. And these, so it's already odd, because if the word's in the beginning, and the word is with God in the beginning, and the word is God in the beginning, you already have the makeup of blowing people's minds in confusion, because how does that even work? So that would be verse 1, if I remember correctly, right? Oh, I didn't even have it on there. Should have left my Bible open. So that would be verse 1. Does that make sense for anybody? Is that easily followed along? Okay. So, yeah, we'll move forward with that one then. We'll go to the next part of speech, and that is conjunctions. So, can anyone sing for me the Schoolhouse Rock song from back in the day? Oh, what? Please.
Yeah,
Ron
we
can
know
probably
it.
sing it.
This is not monetized, so
I
copyright
just
infringements
passed the
won't
first part,
happen.
And then Jody and I both bombed out after that, I think. Unless you did you watch
I had to look it up, by the way. Cameron had never heard it before.
Looking up words, reason clauses, conjunction, what's your... Alright, that's all I got.
Sounds making them run right.
Yeah. Sentences and stuff.
Well, I actually grabbed the lyrics from the beginning of the
Oh,
song.
There you go.
So, I'm not going to sing it.
Oh.
Sorry. I'm going to speak it like William Shatner. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses. Conjunction, junction, how's that function? I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done. Conjunction, junction, what's their function? I got and, but, and or. They'll take you pretty far. And, that's an additive, like this and that. And then there's but. That's sort of the opposite. Not this, but that. And then there's or, O-R. But when you have a choice like this or that, and, but, and or get you pretty far.
That was very animated.
Yeah, I know.
You didn't know how to sing it. It looks great.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, since we all know how the English use of the conjunction works, I'm sure we all know now because of Schoolhouse Rock. They should bring it back. Let's find out a few of them in Greek and what they generally mean. Again, these are general categories. The first conjunction we're going to learn is the only conjunction in John 1, 1-5.
Oh,
Oh, Megan's very not excited
well,
about
we
that.
don't get to use all of them?
No.
Oh.
Well, you're going to have to learn Greek on your own on that one. It's the only one in John 1-5. It's exciting for some people, not for others. This is actually one of the most used words in the New Testament besides the article. So the article and this conjunction are the most common words in the New Testament. It is Kai. It is Kai. It is a word in Greek that connects two nouns, two verbs, two phrases, two clauses, so on and so forth. Most often it's simply translated as and. That is what this word means. It is a coordinating conjunction. It is and. But if the context has contrasting elements to it, it can actually mean but, depending. It also has an adverbial usage. I only mention that so you know it does that. It can mean even and also. One of the reasons, if you're curious, one of the reasons it does that is, let's say you had a sentence or a phrase or a clause and it has and in it, or this kai in it, and both of the elements are not linked in any way at all. They're not a contrasting usage. They're not additive. Then it would be Daniel drank the cup, even the hot cup. They're equals. There's nothing different about them. It's not Daniel drank the cup and the hot cup. No. You're not trying to do that. It'd be something along those lines. So, it's kind of a bummer that there's only one. Megan is already very sad that there's only one. So, I want to give you two more for your memory banks. Pastor Dale has mentioned these in sermons. I chose these two because one of them that I was thinking about using, I decided not to use that one. So, they are haughty. 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 This is a conjunction that has three main functions. So there are three functions to this conjunction, three main ones. It can explain what caused something to happen. It would be translated as because. There's a reason I picked these because they're very, very important words in Scripture. So because. It may also introduce an entire clause, and it take the place of a noun. So you would translate it as that in that juncture. Sorry. And finally, it is Koine Greek's way of showing direct discourse. Hoti is Greek's quotation marks, if you will. And it would often be untranslated. If you ever listen to a John Piper sermon, or, of course, Pastor Dale, he'll say, this is a haughty clause. Haughty. I'm like, oh, man. Or hoti. I think he says hoti. But pronunciation is not everything. So it's really important because whatever's coming after it is going to be explaining something that happened before. It's going to tell you something happened. So Daniel drank the cup because he loves coffee. That's why I drank the cup. It's important. It's very important. So the next one is gar. Just remember that is not yap. It is gar. And it is a subordinating conjunction. Does anyone know what a subordinating conjunction is? Anyone? Does anyone know what a subordinate is?
Is it like while or?
Yeah, it would work that way. Yeah, I think while is a subordinating conjunction. I think so, yeah. What it is a subordinate is someone underneath you. They rely on you. So it's something along those lines. So a subordinating conjunction is a conjunction that connects two things together, but one relies on the other. And so what gar is it lets the reader know that what follows it helps clarify or expound what preceded it. So when you see this word in a sentence or a clause or a paragraph or anything, what comes after it is actually explaining what came before it. Gar is almost a semicolon, if you will, in that manner, an English semicolon. And it's usually translated as for, since, or then. For, since, or then. Predominantly, when you see the word for in your English Bible, the word gar is what's behind it. There may be other words as well, but
Like when it says therefore, it says therefore all
Therefore is actually a different conjunction, and that is the word un.
Oh, that's easy.
Un. Omicron. It'd basically be this, but with a ni. Side note, this means no or not. Just, there you go. I wasn't even planning on covering that, but yeah, it means no or not. So, that's mostly all that we'll cover in that respect. So, what I want to do now is I want to take about 5 or 10 minutes. So, I want to take 5 or 10 minutes, and I want you to run through it. I didn't give it a lot of room, did I? Not really. I want to take 5 or 10 minutes. You can flip the page over if you want. And I just want you to go through it. Try and ignore what you know about it from the English text. Marianne, you are more than welcome to read an English text. And I just want you to go through it with what you can remember. Or if you brought all of your material from each week, use that. And just try and go through and figure out how each word's working with the others. Again, I want you to get a feel for how well you've done outside of class in studying, or if at all, either way, doesn't matter. This isn't a who's better than the other. I just want you to get a feel for it, especially with what we've learned today is actually, I would consider the harder part of learning Greek. It's why it's more of I would say interactive at least. So just take about five minutes or so and try it out. Check this out. This is besides Greek. This is English. And you can actually look at them side by side.
Yeah, I was looking at mine and this one. So is this an article?
That is the article.
I learned some Latin and back, so it kind of remembering.
I don't know how the article works in Latin. So.
There are no articles in Latin actually, but
How sad.
yeah. But some of as far as like the type of, I just recall learning about the dative and
Okay.
genitive, and although I don't.
That's
But
I just finished second year Greek this year. I've been studying Greek for about 3.5 years. About a year and a half of that was on my own. And then I decided if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. So then I went to lives in New Jersey. I did lessons over Skype just to keep me on point. And so I just finished, and as a celebration, I bought a poster of Romans in Greek and decided I'd share the information I've learned with my church. So, and one of the best ways to do it is pick an easy verse. This is actually some of the easiest Greek in the New Testament. And since this is most people's favorite verse in the Bible, and it's actually really easy, and most everything in it is a noun. There are only a couple verbs, there's only a couple of prepositions, there's only one conjunction, and it just flows away. It's really easy, and surprisingly enough, with what we know right now, what we've learned in class, whoever really went all the way forward, like really took to it and sat down and read it like for an hour each night, would actually be able to sit down and, with the information we put in today, should be able to sit down and really understand a lot of it other than verbs. So, yeah, I was doing it last night with Cameron, and I was blown away after reading it thousands of times. And I said, well, the first century, how did the first century audience hear that? Just go, oh my gosh. The word was in the beginning. The word was with God. The word was also God. And he made everything? Everything was made through him? Okay. Huh? That was good. It does. It was one of the first part of the introduction. The first lesson was to observe that along with line. Trying to get people excited to learn Greek. It's a tough task because for English speakers, it's hard to learn a new language because English is horrible. And a language like this actually makes it easier to learn other languages because this is a foundational language to all other languages. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That there for you there.
Me too.
Smaller. My teeth are you through.
No multimedia during class. You want a little more time to look through it, or you want to?
Just to clarify, I'm not Facebook.
I think I got and down really well. And.
What's that again?
And. I got and down.
It's awesome. It's everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
And the feminine article. Everyone's got that down. The feminine nominative singular. Everyone's got that down. Kai and Hey. So.
The word order is completely backwards in John 1:1. I never really paid attention to that.
What do you mean? How so?
So at the end where typically in our English translation you say the word was God, is that she just flipped it completely.
God was the word.
God was the word.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've heard that before, but yeah, it's kind of funny when you look at it.
Oh yeah. So this is sort of the conclusion of the class, believe it or not, but we'll go a little more. So what we've only got 14 words left out of 61 in John 1:1 through 5. We've only got 14 words left to figure out how to read most of John 1:1 through 5, which is kind of shocking. I did a little math last night. And those 6 words are the same exact word. 6 of those words are the same word. They're all verbs. And 6 of them are the same exact verb. And for a teaser for next week, they actually mean he, she, or it was. Surprise. So what I want to ask are a couple questions and then offer the homework. I decided that is, as always, optional. Homework is always optional. But today, the questions I want to ask are, how well do you think you're doing? And with 2 weeks left, what do you think you should focus on? So, with this optional homework, I just want you to review. If you want to do homework, just review everything we have. I'll send all of the lessons, the handouts in email again. And I just want you to go over whatever you feel needs work. Go re-watch some lessons if you want. Or just simply write out noun declensions. I mean, whatever you want to do. It's all up to you. Whatever. And then I gave you 5 more vocabulary words. Cameron and I went over these last night, and he picked one of them. And I thought it was a really great idea to pick one of them. One of them was really good. And yeah, and then I decided to throw amen on there for kicks. That is the word amen. As you notice, it can be translated amen.
Fair.
Yeah, so. And as another side note, in my lexicon, doulos only has one translation.
Slave.
Slave.
I agree.
as a small side note.
That's
Hashtag
what I
ESV is
thought.
wrong. Anyway.
Every English translation
So-
is wrong, pretty much.
So, in summation, there is only one verse in here that, even after we get done with verbs, is going to be super, super, super confusing. Because as the Net Bible says, and the Net Bible is made by a whole bunch of smart men, very, very smart men, this section right here, from dia, or D out to here, is the weirdest verse in all of John 1 through 5. So if you literally translated it, so this is going to be the funnest. This is what I was saying to Marianne, what like blew my mind with Cameron and I sitting there going through it. So this says, through him everything was made. What's it? All things, everything, through him was made. And without him, what was made, not one. Nothing was made without him. Which was made. So, all things, everything through him is made. So, he is the means by which everything's made. And without him, what is made, not one. So, without him, nothing is made, which has been made. So basically it's saying
It's redundant.
he made everything. It's totally redundant. It's going out of its way to emphasize he's uncreated. So if everything that's made is made through him, that means he has to be uncreated. Question mark? And without him, so if he didn't exist, everything that's made wouldn't be made. It's going out of its way to say he's uncreated. Yet he's in the beginning. This word is in the beginning, and he's with God, and he is God. He was in the beginning with God.
Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, but that's a little. Any questions, or if you want me to go through it even farther, any questions or any clarification? You want to go over something one more time?
Will you, our new vocabulary words, will you just
Yeah.
pronounce each one of them? So
Yeah,
that
sure.
helps me because I can't.
It helps me too
Yeah.
because I have a different pronunciation system I use, so I have to use the one I've taught everyone else.
Okay.
So the first one is doxa. Doxa. Its genitive there is the eta sigma, so that would be doxa or doxis, doxase. And it is feminine because of the article. The primary idea is one of appearance, then of opinion, based on what seems good or impressive. It also has esteem as a product, and it means glory, honor. We use this most Sundays. We sing what's called the doxology.
Oh.
It's a word that means word of glory, or words pertaining to glory, glorious words, so forth and so on. The next one is ethnos. Its genitive is ous, ethnus, and it is a neuter word because of the article, to, and it is a number of people or animals forming a group, commonly people groups, determined either geographically or by a custom or tradition. As a small side note, I got these definitions straight out of the lexicon. So, and it is, anyway. So it would be nation or nations in the plural, Gentile or Gentiles, people or people group or people groups, if you will, or peoples, either way. So think ethnic. That's where we get our word ethnic from. The next one is charis. Its genitive is charitos, and it is feminine. As a small side note, that's one of those third declension words that I didn't teach anybody because we were trying to stay simple here. But that is a feminine word, and it is a disposition marked by inclination to generosity. Frequent use is something unmotivated by worth of the recipient. And it can be translated as favor or grace. Charis. Charis. Lovely word. There's another word in Greek, and it's choris, and it means against, if I remember correctly. And yeah, you get thrown off sometimes. As I said before, I also put amen up there. Strong affirmation and worshipful statement, often doubled to show intensity. So it can be translated as truly, amen, or truth. Whenever you see truly, truly, or I tell you the truth, it's going to have either amen there once, twice, or amen with a speaking verb. So, amen, amen. And then doulos. It is a masculine word because of the article. Its genitive is ou, so doulou. And it is of a male, except in passages where the plural may suggest inclusion of females. A person has owned property totally or unquestioningly at the behest of the owner. So that would be that, and it should be translated slave, but we normally soften the blow and someone will say servant, which is absolutely incorrect. Bondservant's fine. That would be that unquestioningly perspective. A bondservant is someone who is enslaved to a particular person, but they are unquestioningly enslaved. It's by choice or necessity because they owe them money, they've been conquered, and yeah, so forth and so on. And a slave is totally owned. They totally own them, period. So, any more questions?
Thank you.
Any more? No? Fantastic. I totally forgot to pray before we started, so I will pray us out instead of in. So, dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful rainy day. I'm sure somebody enjoyed it. And thank you for these wonderful saints who have taken their time out of their day to listen to me babble on about your scriptures in their original language, which we are so thankful that you have given them to us and given us the means to which we can learn it. In the name of your Son, amen. Someone just end it.